So today we have a very special guest. We have Alex Alexandra. She is a lawyer and solicitor in the jurisdictions of US, the UK, and soon to be, she'll start covering Canadian law as well. So yeah, Alex, just feel free to introduce yourself.
Right. Hi. Thank you so much for having me. As you've said, I'm qualified in the UK, qualified in the US. We do a lot of global work as well with clients in different jurisdictions, depending on their needs. We cover Australia, New Zealand at times, dealt with Shanghai client recently. So it's truly global. And yeah, I'm the founder of Silicon Law. I'm the director, and we provide naturally legal services. And that's me.
And the way I was introduced to you was from the partner of our UK entity, Henry, who's there in the corner. He's actually in a table really far away from me right now. I did not expect him to be this far away.
I can't see you over here.
But yeah, Henry initially introduced me to Alexandra because as tax advisors, we tend to get really caught up with the legal ramifications of the structures that we create. And to that, we had to defer to someone very reliable, very trustworthy, and that's where Alex comes in. So Henry has worked with Alex on many, many cases, and you guys can just tell us on how that relationship was built over time, and you've known each other for half a decade. So
yeah, I'm really excited as well because this is Alex's first time in Dubai, so this is a bit of a warm welcome for us, but also as we said, we've been working together for about 5 years, and how we got to know each other, well, we obviously worked together, but we were very keen. We're both animal lovers, and we do a lot of stuff outside, which maybe we can talk about later. But in terms of the work, we sort of founded our businesses around the same time as well. So we were very, it's amazing to find fellow entrepreneurs, but also someone who effectively the services we offer from the US and the UK side, from the tax perspective, she can offer from the legal perspective. So it was just a natural harmony where we were able to offer that sort of cross-border, more of that sort of white glove service to our clients. So that was really interesting. And I got to say, it's just been a pleasure working with Alex so far. And recently there's been a lot of changes, obviously, with the nature of our clients, moving sort of more from the Middle East. But I'm really, really curious to hear more about Alex's experience working with me, because I hope it's been good for you and nice and profitable for you as well.
Yeah, it's been great. There are so many areas that require both of our expertise. So having a lawyer, having a tax advisor, having someone who can deal with accounts and know everything there is to know about numbers, having everything under one roof, it really helps. It's really difficult for our clients. I often had feedback from clients that they came from, they had a lawyer, they had an accountant, and some of them were brilliant, of course, but they were all very separate. So they had to go to everyone and explain the same thing over and over and over. And then the lawyer would come back to the client and say, well, I need this. They would need to go to the accountant, and no one would ever communicate. And having everything done in the same place, it really helps.
Well, and that's exactly how you and I, Mohammed, that's how we started, because we were offering similar service, but it's more complementary. So it's very similar to our situation.
And it's not like we operate in vacuums. We very much provide deliverables in kind of a round table system where the plan is being formed actively with each party present, and it's not through emails or phone calls with each separate departments. And, I of course, I haven't worked with Alex as much as you have, Henry, but I do quite appreciate the more direct communication. You're very polite, Henry, but I do prefer the very Polish style, to the point, very blunt way of speaking, and because I'm much like that as well. So yeah, it's been wonderful working with Alex, and I perceive it to continue to be working perfectly because we all have a very similar mindset in how to provide the product or service to our clients.
That's exactly it.
At the end of the day, the client is the priority. So whatever serves the client serves everyone, right?
So many of our clients, they tend to function, they explore many jurisdictions. When you're dealing with people that are moving potentially hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars across borders, of course, that requires a lot of effort and research. So Alex, could you explain what are the key jurisdictions your clients are relocating to, and what are the legal considerations they should make before making any decision on a jurisdiction?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there tends to be a lot of movement these days around the globe for our clients. And I think, well, I have a lot of US clients who are relocating to the to the UK from the US to to benefit from the legal system more than anything else. As we know, US can be quite complex with their federal and state laws and everything in between. So they do like running their businesses from the UK. There are many clients that are moving to the UAE for obvious reasons, predominantly the tax. There is a lot of movement between, I mean, specifically, I think UK and Spain and Portugal as well. They offer the talent visas. They naturally, you have access to the EU if you live there, and you get residency. In terms of things to think about, I think the most important thing is just think about your assets, think about where they are, what they are. Can you protect them? Can you move them into a company? Does it make sense to do that? Do you have a will? Deal with all of the paperwork, all of the legalities of things. It requires coordinated legal planning, not just tax planning, but I'm sure there's a lot on the tax side as well.
And that's so important because me and Henry can kind of create all the paperwork or processes that we believe are compliant to the tax law, and that might be fine, but as long as there's a technicality or loophole that can be kind of attacked upon by whatever government or jurisdiction, that's incredible exposure to the point that if we did create a structure and it's completely viable, if a judge looks at your case and decides that this doesn't hold, despite all the evidence, that's why legal protection is kind of the second arm needed to protect people on top of their tax advisory and planning. So, so do you have anything in mind in terms of cases that you've worked that you felt that needed kind of the combination of you two working together side by side? Or do you feel like when you are working a case, how does it usually go? Do you stretch the legal structure first? Do you do the tax planning first? Is it both simultaneously together? How do you end up reaching the conclusions you do with Henry?
It's a great question. We're actually working on a case right now that requires a combination of US, UK, and UAE. So it's that sort of golden triangle where obviously we've got all of those bases covered. We've got the UK naturally, but also the UAE, because I think what a lot of people misunderstand or don't understand is that when we talk about structuring is that there's a lot of nuance, and as we know, people are very complicated, so families are often spread out all over the globe. There's often kids, there's wives, husbands. So first thing we do normally is the tax piece, because we want to save money in some way, and then I think, but equally there's that conversation that we have, so we sort of have a bit of a flow chart that we go through where we go through the tax planning, and then we look at the legal side and the structuring that goes into it, and then before we do anything we make sure that we're both comfortable with what we're doing, because it's amazing, and I think Alex you'll probably agree, is that there's a lot of contradictions where we can save you a lot of tax, but then we might find out later that there's some big legal issue to do with enforceability, for example. But I know you, on this recent case we were working on, there was a big issue around enforceability.
Yes, absolutely. That is completely right. I think that's why it's so important to have those meetings that we do. Whenever we meet a client, we first have a call just to agree on a very high level what it is that we're likely going to need. And then once we speak to the client a bit more and understand more about their circumstances, that's what we can tailor it and make sure that that the client is covered on the tax and on the legal side.
And what I noticed is that you immediately after that conversation set, you start talking about succession and wills. And then what was truly fascinating is when you spoke about wills, like multiple wills, multiple jurisdiction, and then you spoke about having one global will is actually a bad idea. And I was really interested in this conversation because, of course, you'll need to secure yourself in each jurisdiction, but when it comes to succession, you need to also guarantee that succession in each jurisdiction as well. So, Alex, you explained to me that having one global will is actually very dangerous in terms of exposure. Why is that? Why can't you just have one will that covers everything, and why you would need to secure yourself in multiple jurisdictions?
Absolutely. There are two key reasons, really. Different countries don't recognize each other's wills. So, for example, UAE wouldn't recognize a UK will. So it's very important to make sure that each jurisdiction where you have assets and where you have any presence whatsoever, that you're covered on that side. But also something worth remembering is assets that are not movable, such as property. Those would normally always be governed by the rules of probate in the state or in the jurisdiction where they are based. And that's not something that we can always be flexible with, although sometimes we can. So it's really important for clients to have a full review of their assets, see where they are, see what they do. Do they have cash? Do they have property, crypto, anything like that? And then have a proper assessment what they need.
And a lot of times as well, people who move here, so for example, myself, I moved here less than 6 months ago. Most people have lives still in the country they came from. So they might have assets, bank accounts. So what you're saying is that people should do a holistic review of that and see, because a lot of people move here for 4 or 5 years as part of tax planning. So should those people be considering updating or at least reviewing their wills?
Yes, absolutely. I think having a review like that is very useful, and all the wills need to coordinate with each other. They cannot contradict. And often what happens is, if you use a will from the internet, for example, the clause that is normally in there automatically revokes all the other wills that you have globally, and it just defeats the whole point. So it's really important to, if you are present globally, to have that someone.
So it's best not to have a Lord of the Rings style one will to rule them all situation. Definitely not. And that's pretty important as a point of just making sure all your bases are covered. And I guess sometimes people, what I found is clients that will come to us and kind of overly rely on us and saying, well, you're a tax advisor. Aren't you going to cover legal? Yes, I abide by tax law, but we also need lawyers involved very much so in kind of securing our legal protection. So can you kind of explain what's the difference between tax optimization and legal protections, and why you would need both distinct services when really protecting your wealth?
Yeah, of course. Tax optimization is just that you're trying to do everything you can to minimize the taxes. Legal protection safeguards the assets from litigation or from divorce, or protects your family and protects all the assets that you have. So I would say they are complementary, not interchangeable, really. So yeah.
And in terms of, and from the tax planning, oftentimes this is exactly what you said, Mohammed, where people feel like perhaps maybe the tax planning is the legal planning. But I mean, I didn't even go to university. I'm not a qualified solicitor. I am a qualified tax advisor. So people often assume that, oh, you work in tax, you must be lawyers. But that's certainly not the case. And I think this is a big area of confusion. When people talk to an accountant or a tax advisor, they think that they can also do their wills, or they can do contract drafting, but that's very much a separate activity and something that should also be considered as part of the tax planning piece, where obviously we don't just say go speak to a lawyer. It's a case of, here's our recommended lawyer who we use for, and we've personally used as well. So have you found that a lot of people often assume that the tax optimization means that they don't need any legal help, or do you find that people often know the difference?
100%. I mean, we had a client a year or so ago that have set up what they thought was a corporate structure globally, and they thought that they would be protected, but it turns out they were not. So although they were set up offshore and they were saving tax and everything was grand on that side, on the legal front they weren't protected at all. And in fact, should anyone, they were not sued, thankfully, but if they were, they would be in trouble. So yeah.
And I guess we are now dealing with more complicated cases with coming with things that are emerging technologies as well. Cryptocurrencies have been kind of the bane of everyone's existence within the service sector, and we're trying to navigate them the best way we can, looking at multiple jurisdictions and regulations. So from a legal perspective, how do you factor in, for example, if someone owns a lot of cryptocurrencies and they're looking to legally protect themselves, what can someone do from a legal standpoint to protect their own digital assets if they had to?
I think the most important part is having a power of attorney in place and having a valid will in place. Because at the end of the day, if you're still around and you have the capacity to deal with your own assets, you will. The problem happens when something goes wrong and you become sick and you're unable to make decisions anymore. The problem with crypto in general and the assets is that the regulatory classification of those assets differs globally. So in some, for example, in the US, they are starting to treat it as security now, so it's going to be a lot more regulated. But in other jurisdictions, they do not. For example, in the UK, I mean, they are obviously thinking about doing something, but they are not really there yet. So it's really important to make sure you review the right jurisdictions, and that's another problem. What is the right jurisdiction? Is it where you were where you created the key? Is it where you are now? Is it some other place? No one really knows. So that's why it's even more important. And for inheritance purposes as well, those are treated. Wills don't often address it. So if you do have crypto, having a properly prepared will that deals with that aspect is very important, but there are also tax considerations. And
what are some of the exposures? Because a lot of people, especially in our industry, who they've made a lot of money on crypto, either through, by luck or whatever you want to call it, and they want to exit those positions. But a lot of times people move here and they have wallets in the UK or US. What are some of the legal considerations if someone, for example, was to move to the UAE and they have these wallets or these digital assets overseas? What are some of the things they should be thinking about?
I think having an asset inventory is probably the most important part to know what's where. And there is also a way to manage your keys securely. So having a management plan in that regard, it would also be very, very helpful long term. Jurisdiction specific guidance is also something that needs to be sought depending on where you're coming from, where you're going. I think that's where you would start.
Because I think a lot of people, especially coming from the UK, they're unfamiliar with the rules around cryptocurrencies. So one of the biggest things I've seen recently is that they will have a wallet that they opened whilst they were in the UK, and then they've left and then they've moved somewhere else, and they still want to have the anonymity of those assets, but then they find that they're actually, you open that wallet whilst you were living in the UK as a tax resident, so that wallet is still feeding information to HMRC. So they'll sell those assets, not report them because they don't have to pay tax on them legally, but then they figure out that actually they forgot to, close that wallet, they forgot to open up a new wallet. And I know, Mohammed, you deal with a lot of these off-ramping exercises, so maybe you want to I think some people don't really understand how that works because they're trying to exit these positions, but it's like a big rush to the door for everyone trying to sell those assets.
The issue with when you consider about exiting your crypto assets, it's an exercise that goes beyond just 2 months, 3 months. It's almost like the product is contradictory to the method of how you want to off ramp, and that's the biggest issue. Like if I wanted to wire someone $100,000 in 5 minutes, I could, but just because you can doesn't mean you should. And most of the time, our tax planning circumstances or structures usually take 6 months to a year. If we're lucky, maybe 2 years just to get everything in line before they can actually off-ramp them. At the same time, the clients have the issue of the actual value of their crypto increasing or decreasing because it kind of works like a Forex market or commodities market where the value goes up and down. So I think that if you are going through any kind of off-ramping exercise, you need to think about off-ramping the second you have any substantial amount of money. And then, of course, secure your tax planning and then cover yourself legally as well to make sure that you then cover the bases that would lead you to a technicality, still making everything kind of, pointless as an exercise. So I think that it's interesting because while off-ramping cryptocurrencies, people think that they could just show up here tomorrow and then go to, whatever exchange and then do a P2P wire. Let's just say that the bank doesn't stop you or whatever jurisdiction that you're dealing with doesn't ask you too many questions. You actually get to it. There's still a chance of the funds being frozen, their local tax jurisdiction flagging them, the KYC not passing for whatever arbitrary reason. So these things take a lot of time. And I think that ultimately having a team together that can just let you know about all these little tiny sore points all up front, so you can kind of square them away in a couple of weeks, as opposed to figuring it out through a mistake is so much more valuable. So yes, it's exhausting. It can oftentimes cause a lot of collaboration, but that was why it was so important for us to kind of create a team or kind of a network of entrepreneurs that we trust and know, that can just quickly hop on a call, shift through everything in a matter of a couple hours, and create a very effective plan that's tailored to the client. And you said something very interesting about this, Henry, is that, you know, if we keep operating in silos, it creates a great amount of risk. And it's so true. I didn't even think about it that way. So why do you think that is the case? Why do you think that if for major firms or even medium-sized firms that are operating as separate departments as opposed to a team causes so much more risk? And maybe Alex, you can add to that as well.
Yeah, I mean, and I think it's common sense in a way, because I think we've all dealt with clients where there's those, you know, you're dealing with their attorney or lawyer, or you're dealing with their accountant, and no one's talking to each other. And in fact, they actually only, and to be honest, sometimes it's a risk, you know, they want to cover their own risk. But a lot of times they only want to talk to the client. So what happens is you have this team of people, let's say it's 4 or 5 people, who are at the end of the day there to service their clients, but those people won't talk to each other. And part of it's because they don't confidentiality, they don't want to talk. And then naturally the clients just sat there in the middle just thinking, you know, what the hell is everyone doing? Because they're all telling me different things. And also, I mean, it's unfortunately sometimes not every advisor is correct. And oftentimes we have this issue where if we'd just spoken, let's just say, you know, you, Mohammed, were our client and Alex and I were doing some work for you. If we just had a 5-minute conversation between us, we could have avoided a 1-hour conference call, because then, you know, it would be like, oh, have you thought about the ramifications or X, Y, and Z? And you just think, well, no, but that's exactly why I have my advisors to do this, because it's not, the clients don't always necessarily want to have that you know, siloing of different, or pigeonholing of different advisors, because oftentimes, you know, that no one's wrong, by the way, everyone can be correct, but it's just that customer service experience for the client to just feel like no one's talking to each other, everyone's telling me different things, often contradictory, and I just want someone to just deal with this, and I want the headache off. And I know, Alex, we had a recent case where, you know, you and I, we just talk between ourselves and we can solve a lot of the problems. But I guess you see that a lot, where you're probably dealing with someone, if you're not dealing with me or Mohammed, you're probably dealing with someone else's accountant or tax advisor. And how's that experience been for you?
It does happen a lot. A lot of my clients come to me with their own team on board, and they just need me to fit in with the little legal piece. But the problem is that with the tax advice, whilst most tax advisors focus on optimizing the tax, and the structure may be tax efficient, it can be vulnerable on the legal side. I think the most common example is, and what tax advisors really like to advise clients, is having a trust in place.
They love
it. They do. And you know, the trusts are great and they can really save you a lot of tax. So on the tax front, yes, they are completely right. But then they forget to tell the client about the reporting or the compliance or how you can operate and all the legalities that go with it. And that, most importantly, not always you can just take your money out, which a lot of my clients come to me and they act very surprised when I tell them, well, trust is a separate thing. It's not something that you can just play around with and take your money whenever you want. And that's not something that they were told before. So I think it's really important that the integrated approach can really save clients a lot of money and headache.
Time.
And time and headache.
And I think time's the most important thing, because oftentimes, you know, when we're dealing with entrepreneurs, they don't have a lot of time. And people often assume, you know, for us, this is our job. So we get paid to do these, to have these conversations. But for a client, this is a time sink. And I think this is where the three of us have sort of built this model where we can just simplify everyone's life and save people time, because not everyone always wants to have, there are some exceptions, and we know who those are, but there are some people who just want us to just deal with it and to be told, here's what you should do, and here's the ramifications of doing so, without having this speak to a lawyer. I mean, fair enough, you know, this is complex stuff, but I don't like this sort of delegation of responsibility where they say, you should get separate independent legal advice. I mean, certainly that should be the case in some areas, but I think a lot of what's happening is a lot of this covering of one's own risk, and they don't want to. Tax advisors are scared to say something and get it wrong. So it's probably the same with lawyers as well. You don't want to say something and get it wrong from a tax perspective. So why not just we join up and we deal with both of those, and then the client can get a complete piece of analysis.
And sorry.
No, it's perfect. Fine. Please
No,
continue.
I was just going to add that how often we have conversations with clients where we just go in and have a little debate ourselves, and the client just sits there listening to us, and while we try to figure out what the right answer is.
Yeah, and this is also the case with us, Mohammed, where there is no right answer. Sometimes there are just answers, and it's just about weighing out those answers.
It's also interesting that the client gets to see that what our process is. It's not like we're charging a billable per 60 seconds or things of that nature. We're just sitting down. I propose an idea, and then I very quickly kind of lean to Alex, being like, Alex, exposures, Henry, risks, and then we go over each option. And then we'll quite often find is that our initial plans might be curbed slightly bit. Maybe we'll spread out some of the risk through multiple jurisdictions as opposed to the most efficient way. But it is a collaborative effort at the end of the day. And I think that working this way makes it so much simpler, as well as laying out all the options to the client. It's very rarely that one solution or one flow chart of solutions is the way you're going to get an answer. But like you said, many jurisdictions, many laws and regulations to kind of consider. So we like to lay out all the cards on the table, give them our best suggestions, and ultimately let the client decide what would be the best way to go about things. And another thing is that most clients don't seem to realize that you don't just pay somebody and you leave them their own devices like a robot to complete things. It's very much, we'll need continuous kind of information from the client. They need to be very aware of their submission deadlines, their legal submission requirements, as well as paperwork. So I do like the way we work. I think that the clients might find the way we work to be kind of very continuous and an ongoing process. But hey, if you just do something and never keep up to date with it, that's where the exposures of both tax and legal tend to creep in for our clients, and have come in. We've come into kind of a lot of distressed cases a lot of the times where someone else has messed something up, and the advisors or lawyers aren't necessarily they hide behind kind of the liability of, well, you didn't tell us this, you didn't tell us that, or that's that department. We don't really do that. We kind of are on call, talking quite in detail with cases, make sure everyone's on the same page and we all agree. And there's quite often followed by an email chain about everything we've agreed. Everyone shakes hands. The lawyers are in agreement. The tax advisors in multiple jurisdictions are in agreement, and then we execute. Now, if you went to kind of a larger, more established firm, that's a hefty bill. That might as well just wipe away the tax benefits right then and there if you start. But we kind of believe in letting you know what the solution is first, and then we get paid on the execution, not necessarily just to be a 1 hour think tank that then demands £10,000 for our time.
We haven't even spoken about the cost saving aspect to it, because I think people forget that having this joined up approach, none of this siloing, is that it saves the client money, because we're spending all of our time efficiently talking, having these meetings, and there's none of this, 1 hour of my time and then 1 hour of her time spent analyzing what I've done for that 1 hour. It's a lot of this just, we can share the load and just simplify things. And I think cost wise, I mean, compared to some of the bigger, obviously we're not in the big leagues yet, nor do we particularly want to be, but I think, we've seen, and we've worked at previous firms where they charge 4 or 5 times what we would charge, just because there's a lot of that liability cover, in that they're basically spending half the time just ensuring that this is not going to cause them a lawsuit. But what do you notice, Alex, in terms of the difference between a large, big legal firm and, someone a bit more boutique and agile like yourself?
I think they charge more because they can a lot of the times, not even for the actual value they deliver. And also, you often pay for the letterhead, which sometimes you need. Sometimes you need a big name on top of your letter, and in that case, completely fine, go and pay for that letter. But in times where you need practical advice and actual support, I think going to a more boutique firm with more personalized approach, I think that's the way to go.
It's also interesting seeing us being from completely different countries. Alex, you're Poland. I was born and raised in UAE, and I'm Asian Pakistani and Henry being from England, we seem to have more in common working with each other than working in a homogenous corporate environment. When you were kind of going through that corporate world, which you have, how did you feel about becoming an entrepreneur and doing things your own way? How do you think your method of operation changed versus yourself in the past as working independently?
Well, I think for me, it was definitely scary. I mean, as is for everyone running their own business. But I think I enjoyed the independence and the fact that in the corporate world, you're often, there is a lot of red tape and you cannot do what you want to do for the client a lot of the times because you're not allowed for whatever reason. And since you're employed, I mean, you follow what your employer tells you. I think that's very problematic because clients, oftentimes I found myself in a position where I wanted to tell the client to do or not to do something, or I knew the answer to their question and I couldn't tell it to them.
Because of red tape.
Because of red tape.
But you're also, like, something that stood out to me, Alex, when we first met was that you're a hardcore hustler. So you're someone who's just, I think you understand and, you, as someone who's come to the UK and started a business and been very successful, it shows me that there's a certain level of entrepreneurship. Then I imagine that wasn't always the case. You probably grew up in a very, I think oftentimes people think entrepreneurship is something you can learn, but I think it's more something you have or you don't have. But the results speak for themselves, and you've been, running your business for almost 2 years now. Mm-hmm. And it's how has that journey been from being a corporate lawyer to being a entrepreneur?
It is just two different worlds completely. I mean, I came from Poland to the UK when I was 16. I came by myself, didn't speak any English, so it was a difficult journey. But then when I started law school, that's really when I started to find my people, my thing, and that's when I knew that's the right thing to do. And I mean, it's been 15 years now, which is such a long time, but. Yeah, it's completely different. But I think being where we are now, I think that's the place where we are best positioned to help people find the answers to the questions that they have.
Yeah, and no more timesheets.
No more timesheets.
It is interesting that we're all basically crossing the 2-year mark this year more or less at the exact same time, maybe a couple of months, and we're realizing that we're now starting to form micro teams of accountants, lawyers, etc. And then I almost have nightmares tossing and turning. It's like, are we becoming a corporation? And,
well, we are.
And it is, I guess, but how do you think that we will attempt to maintain our core identities from our roots as kind of flat management structure, independent consultants? How do you perceive that approach? Like, eventually we're going to have to hire 2-3 people to manage, etc. How are you going to make sure that you retain kind of the straight shooter attitude that we have as we grow as a business?
I think it's finding the right people, which is also coincidentally the most difficult part of running the business, managing people and finding the right people that you trust to be the extension of you and provide the same or better advice than you would have to a client. What about you, Henry?
I think it's personality, because I think we all came from similar, despite, as you said, Mohammed, we all came from maybe different countries, different backgrounds, and faced different challenges. But I think at the end of the day, we all have this, not antagonism, but we have this kind of, we cut through the noise and just get through to the point. And I think the point, we talked about this offline the other week, and it was, the minute we're doing these corporate birthday cards and doing a lot more of this, not that there's anything wrong with that kind of stuff, but I just feel like for us, it's what you see is what you get. And I think that's in many ways, we are now hiring people. We have a team, we have people and responsibilities as employers, but I think what we're not is a big faceless corporation at the end of the day, we're all humans and we all come from this background. We all remember what it was like to get your annual leave rejected because you had some, deadline or some client to suit or to work with. And I just feel like for us, we all have this kind of chip on our shoulder that we're not going to be like that. And we're not going to go back to that life that we gave up and forsake to be an entrepreneur. So I would say we're never... part of our personality just won't let us do that. But equally, we are going to grow and we're going to have to take on those responsibilities as an employer, even if we have to sort of lose ourselves and our core identity, or at least make compromises in some regards.
Yeah, and another a mentality that I have is that there's no way that I'm going to go back to what was before, and then I had to make it work moving forward. And I coined the term ragepreneurship, which is I was so upset, so angry with how things worked in the past that you kind of sink in saying, fine, no one's building a better tomorrow. It has to be me. I can't be the only one out there. And I definitely wasn't. I've met at least more than a dozen other entrepreneurship that started their businesses 2 years ago, and they're eating these big firms as lunch very quickly and expanding very rapidly. And I think that I guess one of my core ambitions is just changing how people work. I don't want any of the people I hire to be kind of falling into the same corporate dynamic that I fell into, and kind of creating a better workplace for everyone. Is that something that you're considering? How do you think that is there going to be an HR department? Is there going to be some strict rules? Now that you're the person calling the shots, essentially, what do you think will be your philosophy towards making sure that you do hire the right person, that you put in the proper guardrails for them to be successful at your own firm?
I think I look at it more like a partnership. I do not have any desire to grow to a size of, one of those big five. I think you lose that personal touch if you do. So I think it's quite important for me anyway, just to keep that personal touch in the business.
And from a lot of the clients of yours that I've worked with, it seems like it's a personality brand. So with you, they're not paying for a lawyer, they're paying for Alex. And that is a really powerful part of your brand, is that, and sure, that works two ways. People can not like the personality and not subscribe. But I think for you, it seems like you have that relationship with your clients that they are paying for you, not for what you produce. Would you say that's right?
That's correct. Yeah, no, I agree. So I think even if I wanted to grow massively and become this massive company, hiring 100 people, I think that may be a challenge, especially for the clients that I've worked with for years now.
Yeah,
I think that it's interesting that when I do explain my business to my friends or other people that are entrepreneurs, I keep on saying, well, I can't wait to shut my doors down to clients and kind of keep a base of clients that I can cater to very personally, make sure I'm always there for them. That matters so much more to me than having a massive firm. I know some of our mutual friends would say that we're being ridiculous. We should grow to as large as possible. But I think we're not in it just to become the biggest a person on the block, but more or less make sure that the service level is being challenged and improved dramatically.
The last thing I'll say about this is, in the UK, there's a bit of a cultural difference, because if you see someone roll up, if your tax advisor rolls up in like a Ferrari or Rolls Royce, then the first reaction most people in the UK have is, well, I'm paying you too much.
Yeah.
And I think there's something to be said about the modesty of not wanting to grow and have, because basically when we get to a certain size, we all agree that half our budget will just be in costs, admin, HR, and those are all justifiable expenses. But when you're a smaller team, it just means that the fee that you're paying is more of you're paying for that person. You're not paying, it's a bit like charity in a way. When you give money to charity, you want to give to the cause, but you acknowledge that 60 or 70% of the costs are not going towards the charity. So I feel in the UK, there's a strong sense of pride in the sense that we are a modest business of modest size, and that we're going to charge you a modest fee, because you're not going to see us rolling around in a Ferrari or Lamborghini, because that if that were the case, then we're overcharging you.
Well, if I am ever rolling around in a Ferrari or Lamborghini, it's definitely my employees' Ferrari or Lamborghini. I will not be buying. That is your decision to make at the end of the day. And I think that it's also a point of pride for me is how much that we pay and compensate our employees. I'm very proud of that. I think that if we can pay double, triple market rate for the right person, we happily will. And oftentimes that is the goal. We want quality people that kind of have our same goals and ambitions in mind. And that will, once again, like Alex said, be an extension of what we're trying to build. And like you said, Alex, absolutely a partnership, not necessarily a boss, employee relationship at all.
So, Alex, if it's okay with you, we're going to ask you some quick fire questions. If you can give us, obviously I appreciate there's a lot of nuance, a lot of detail, but it'll be interesting to hear your thoughts, because these are the most common questions that we come across. So first question I've got for you, Alex, is what is an LPA and how is it different from a will?
Sure. LPA is lasting power of attorney. It operates while you're alive, but you're incapacitated, whilst will works after you pass. So will deal with your assets and the distribution following your death, whilst the power of attorney will allow your closed ones, your close family members to make some decisions either in the health department or in the financial department. Without an LPA, the family would need to go to court and get an order, and it's a very, very stressful, in an already stressful situation, it's a very stressful process, so it's best avoided.
And does the LPA, is that dealt with when you draft the will?
Ideally, yes. I mean, you should get both of those things done, but if you have a will already, there is nothing stopping you from getting an LPA now. You can get it separately.
So the next question would be is how often should you update your will? Should it be every time you buy and purchase a major asset? Should it be annually? Should it be every couple of years? What would be the kind of best case timeline for people to update their wills?
I think there are a few marks to that. I think 3 to 5 years as a baseline is the right amount of time. But also, if something major happens in your life, you have kids, you get married, you get divorced, or if you purchase a significant asset, get some crypto, get something that was not catered for in the original will, you probably want to get a new one.
So whenever there's a big life event or financial event, it seems.
Yes, or if you just move, especially if you move.
Well, that's a really good follow-up to my next question, which is, can you have more than one will? And if so, how many wills can you have?
You can have as many wills as you want, and you should absolutely have more than one, unless everything in your life is in one place. So a lot of jurisdictions will exclude wills from other places. So you want to make sure that you have a will per jurisdiction in which you're based or in which you have assets. And as I've alluded to before, there are assets that cannot be moved, will often be governed by the jurisdiction of that country anyway. So you also want to deal with that to avoid probate as much as possible.
Do expats in UAE need a will in UAE if they have a will in the UK or the USA that covers the majority of their assets?
Absolutely. Sorry. Yes. Yes, they do. UAE does not recognize wills from other countries. You want to make sure that you're protected. You want to make sure that, depending on your religion as well, you may have there are different considerations as to where you want your will registered. So absolutely, yes.
And there's another interesting nuance with LPAs, because you might have a will here, but what if your LPAs in, for example, the UK, where I'm from, do you need an LPA in the UAE if you live here?
You do. I would say you do. So what will happen is, let's assume it's the worst, you're in the hospital and your family members are trying to make a decision about your health. If you have an LPA in a different jurisdiction, they will take it into consideration here. However, they will still need a court order because it's not recognized officially. So whilst they will give it consideration, you still need the court order, and that is stressful, time consuming, especially if you're not from here.
Yeah.
What would you say, in your opinion, is the best piece of advice you can give to someone moving countries who has a family, assets, let's say to the UAE for the first time?
The first thing is map everything out. So all of your assets, your accounts, your digital holdings that you hold across all jurisdictions. You then want to make sure that you get integrated legal advice on the tax and legal front. You want to plan for succession. So deal with that. It's quite important to do it all together, not separately. Having jurisdiction-specific wills and power of attorney, also important for obvious reasons. And I think it's very important to just mention to anyone who's moving, especially to the UAE, not to chase the tax savings so blindly, but think it through and have a plan and speak to the right people to make sure that it works.
So Alex and I, one of the ways we sort of got really friendly when we were working together in London was through animals and through specifically cats. So we're both cat lovers. You have more cats than I do, but we're both very keen cat lovers. And you recently set up an animal rescue. Maybe you want to talk more about that. I sit on the board of trustees, so I already know what it is, but maybe you want to talk more.
Do the cats have a will? Is there succession
no, but
planning?
I'll tell you what, have you ever seen a cat passport? It's the cutest thing.
It is the cutest thing, yes. So with the charity, I mean, it all began when I was actually visiting Poland at the time. I was there when the war in Ukraine broke out, and a lot of the people from Ukraine needed help getting inland to make their journey wherever they were going. So my family and I, we started helping out with the transport, but then we realized at the time, at the beginning of the war, animals couldn't be brought in without a passport, and naturally most of them didn't have one. So the families were forced to leave their pets at the border, which was a terrifying thing. So then we moved to trying to rescue as many pets as we could from the border and find them homes wherever we could. And that's how it all began. So at that point, we then gathered about, we had 40 cats at one time in one rescue. And, we would bring them to health. We would get them passports, vaccines, all those things. And then we would find them homes. It was a bit challenging in Poland to do so. So we started bringing them to the UK. A few of them went to Spain, Portugal. And yeah, we've been doing it since.
And you've been doing that. So obviously you're very busy as a businesswoman in your day job, but you've still somehow found time to do this in your spare time.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I do what I can. I have support of my family. So my mom and my brothers are based in Poland, so they are on the ground. So they are doing the vaccines. They are taking the cats to the vets, doing all those things. And then naturally, I have my husband who's helping as much as he can. So he helps more on the tech side with the website, with the adoption process, vetting people, and so on.
Mm. And I know, Mohammed, you're not so much of an animal fan, but
yeah, I'm allergic to cats and dogs. So yeah, I feel like they're basically tiny little bioweapons to me, but they're very cute. It's really nice that you take care of other people's bioweapons. And yeah, it's really sweet. So yeah, that's Alex. She is a qualified lawyer, multiple jurisdictions, and animal lover. What more could you ask for? So if you ever need to get in contact with Alex, we'll mention her details down below. And yeah, thank you for coming on, Alex.
My pleasure.